Coach Burdick, thank you so much for your time. Really looking forward to talking shop and kind of seeing your approach to things. So for the listeners at home, will you tell us a little bit about your background, your motivation, and kind of where you are currently?
First off, thanks a lot for having me. It's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this, so I'm happy to be here. A little bit about myself. Got into the sports performance game, about 8 to 10 years ago. I had finished up playing junior hockey. I was in Eugene, and I started going to school at the University of Oregon. And from there, I was studying architecture and decided that it wasn't exactly the route that I wanted to go. And I had been down there. I'd taken a physical education class with one of the track and field coaches at the University of Oregon. And that's where I kind of found out about what performance training is and strength and conditioning, because I didn't really grow up around sports where we had a strength and conditioning coach. So when I found out about what collegiate strength and conditioning was, and that there was an opportunity to go and take exercise science, I ended up jumping ships from the University of Oregon up to Oregon State, where they had a pretty good exercise science program.
Yeah.
And then up there, taking classes, and ended up becoming really good friends with my mentor now, Guido Van Rijsmitten, one of the athletic trainers there at the time, and he has a company called Kinetic Integrations. So he had been the same mentor for Nick Winkleman and a couple of other people that have gone through the Exos route, and then he's kind of the guy that pushed me into the direction of Exos.
Okay.
That's kind of how I fell into the Exos game, and then from there, did a couple of internships and ended up here at Portland Timbers.
That's awesome. So with that, right, how kind of does the format of training look, since you're kind of through Exos, but you work with the Timbers? So how does that look as far as facilities and things like that?
It's funny you asked that. So we just redid our facility here. Basically, just did an exact replica of what would be an Exos facility. So everything is Kaiser. We got a 3-way trainer. We've got power plates. I mean, we just went with what we think is the best and what we're used to training with, and we've had a lot of success using their equipment and just going with pretty much that exact same facility setup. So it's been great for us.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's kind of jump into that training, right? So generally speaking, right, what does the macro cycle kind of look like for the Timbers?
It's such a crazy year. I mean, it's a lot of soccer. It's a very long, drawn-out season. Luckily, it's been cut short by a month. So it used to go till December 11th. Now it's only going to go till November 11th. Say you make the whole spiel, you go all the way to the final. So it's nice to have that extra month. But for some teams, it might be an extra 2 months. So we'll actually have a proper off-season, which has never been something the MLS has had. It's always been 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. It's going to be close to 8 to 12, maybe 14.
Oh, wow, that's big.
From into the finals and everything, or into the playoffs. So that's going to be huge for us. Yeah, so from that standpoint, we're building out the season from, our preseason is usually 6 weeks long. Start in late January, and that goes till the middle of February, and then the season starts rolling. Wow. Yeah. Pretty crazy. Yeah.
Things go pretty fast, huh?
Yeah, it flies by. At the beginning of the season, you're always like, oh my gosh, we've got so much season left, and then by the end, you're like, wow, that just flew right by.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of with that, right, what is the testing procedures and what are the fitness or lifting standards, if there are any? What do those look like for the team?
Yeah, to be fair, we don't really have any fitness standards that we go with. We pretty much just use the GPS and the heart rate monitoring to follow their fitness along the preseason and make sure that we are getting more quote-unquote benchmarks for certain guys based off of their positions, if you will. But backing up from there, our preseason testing, I mean, we're doing FMS, SFMA, we have Sparta force plate, we do a hamstring, glute hamstring capacity test that we have the guys do at the beginning of the year. We do the Y balance test. So we have all these protocols that we do to get their baseline standards, and then we also use for their return to play if we have to. And then we monitor that throughout the season. So say it's FMS, we're going to do that every 6 to 8 weeks. With the Sparta force plate, we're doing that either once a week or once every 2 weeks.
Okay. So
tracking there. And we're also using other devices such as Omega Wave to track the readiness.
Okay. So with that hamstring and glute capacity testing, is that kind of I'm not sure if it's the same machine, but is it like the Nord board or is it something similar?
So it comes from Australian rules football or out of Australia, and the study has the individual, the athlete, set up on an 18-inch box, and so you mark it out. So there's, I believe, 30 degrees of knee flexion, and from there, they'll cross their hands over their chest, and then one leg will go up, and they look to do as many hip extensions as they can. So the benchmark is 30. So if a guy gets to 30, we're like, all right, you're good. You don't need to do more than that. Yeah. But if a player can't even do 20, then we've definitely got some issues, or if there's like a massive asymmetry. So that's kind of what we're looking for there.
Okay.
We've seen definitely some athletes that have come in and like on one side they're only able to do like 7 or 8, and then on the other, which is already super bad, and on the other side they're maybe able to do 19, which is still not very good. And there's a massive asymmetry, and two, there's a capacity problem there as well.
Okay.
Almost always see a correlation where that athlete eventually does their hamstring, especially early on in the preseason. So we just use that as a marker to maybe limit their volume at the beginning of preseason and make sure that we can integrate them in safely so that we don't have any hiccups on the way to our first match of the season.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And with that kind of test, is it kind of just a pass-fail basically? So if you hit 30, you pass, and anything under is a fail, or is there like a gradient?
20 is okay, 25 is good, 30 is excellent. That's basically, in the most simplified fashion that you can put it. But it's been, might be oversimplified, but it's been quite helpful for us. At least picture for some of these athletes as they come in.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not going to be like a huge correlation. Like we still have some guy that did 30-30, and maybe 2-3 weeks later still ends up doing his hamstring.
That makes sense. Okay. And on that same fact, I know I'm kind of sticking on this, right? But do you know, does that kind of apply across the board, across genders, or is that like specifically a test for men's?
Yeah, definitely more for the male athlete, at least from the studies that we've done. So yeah, I can't speak to the other population.
Okay. And then on that same note, as far as testing, right? I know you kind of said that you guys stick to GPS and monitoring that way. Do you guys ever do anything like a yo-yo test, or is that kind of more old news at this point?
Yeah, for us that is old news. We don't really think in that sense so much that we don't really put physicalities into one silo. We kind of take some of the principles that like Fergus has been talking about, where the physical, the technical, the tactical, the mental, like all of those components need to be blended together. So we try to do that in the sport as much as we can, like get their physical qualities or their physical fitness from playing the sport, and then we'll do supplemental running or whatever exercises we need to as we see fit. So a lot of times, like say if our coach wants to do a lot of small-sided stuff and they're not reaching high velocities or getting enough high-intensity running, then we'll have to supplement.
Okay.
A lot of using the GPS to monitor that.
Yeah.
So the guys are getting similar match loads in a training week that they would in a match, so that their body's ready for it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, and on that same token, how do you guys kind of attack that mental side? If we're referring kind of to Fergus, right, and the game changer, how do we kind of attack that mental side?
Yeah, I guess to be honest, that's probably one of our areas that we're lacking as a whole. It would be nice to have a full-time psychologist for that type of stuff, but I guess from the mental standpoint, it's more or less just putting the guys into an environment and hoping that we're cultivating the right environment.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that I'd like to see us trying to get a full-time sports psychologist, because we definitely have some players that have been in need of sports psychology for certain parts of the year, whether it be they've had an injury or they're not playing, they're not making the roster, they're not playing well, versus just saying, hey, you're a pro, you get paid, you got to suck it up.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're humans, and we need to treat them with as much respect and compassion as we can, because that's definitely the one thing that I feel like we're lacking as a club.
Yeah.
So just implement a little bit more.
Okay, that makes sense. And kind of the last question on this testing thing, you talked about GPS. Do you guys use any specific brands that you guys like, or is it how does that look?
Yeah, we recently switched to Catapult last year, because before that we were using the Adidas My Coach, and they actually ended up going under or ceasing that project. So when they stopped with the Adidas My Coach system, so we were kind of forced to go one way or another, and we ended up going with Catapult because pretty much one of the best in the business. So we've been super happy, really easy to use, very user friendly.
Excellent.
So it's been good.
Okay. And then transitioning more into the resistance training portion, right? So soccer gets a kind of a bad rap for athletes not wanting to lift, and you can tell me whether or not that's true as far as at the professional level. But what does that look like as far as like increasing compliance and actually getting guys to do some training?
Definitely tricky in soccer. Very much a cultural thing, right? So a lot of like maybe say like the South Americans or people from these different countries don't really want to lift weights, but then you get the American kids that came through college and they're almost wanting to lift too many weights, and you're trying to like get both ends of the spectrum to meet halfway, and then it would be almost perfect. But ways that we get it is we try to educate them as much as we can. We try to, basically all of our training in season especially for the strength training is pretty much going to be auto-regulated. We're just going to kind of let them listen to their bodies and go with that approach. And make it, because once again, it's such a long season. So we use that long season to build out really long progressions as well, and it'll kind of undulate throughout the year. And we'll take that time to maybe start the season with more like FMS focused stuff, but still load it up so they can get really good at those patterns, and then start to overload those a little bit more and more over the season and make the exercise a little bit more complex. And guys seem to have a little bit more fun with that, and then once they notice that they're feeling good and they're playing better, and then they start to appreciate it, and once they're bought in, it's pretty simple from there. Like you don't even really have to coach them anymore. They kind of just take off on their own and almost look forward to doing it.
Yeah.
Fair to like, none of our strength training sessions are more than a half an hour tops. So we're never doing anything crazy unless it's within a rehab guide where they might, do some strength training for up to an hour and a half, depending on what their specific needs are.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think another thing on top of that too is if you can get the big hitters like our DPs to get bought in, and then show the rest of the guys like, hey, like one of the reasons I'm here is because I'm taking care of my body, and this stuff is extremely important for me to feel better and play better. Then the other guys get bought in super easily, and you're always gonna have hiccups throughout the year. Like if you go on a 10-game losing streak, like morale obviously drops pretty low, and then guys aren't wanting to do much. And then you have to start threatening them with fines and this and that, and that's never fun.
Yeah. Now, luckily at my level, I don't have to really threaten with fines, so that's kind of the nice part of college, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So on that same thing, right, is there a preference, or do you have a preference between single versus double leg training, or is it kind of just do both, or is there kind of more specificity there?
Definitely both. I'm a huge fan of both types of exercises for sure. I think, they always say the game's played on one foot, but it's played on both, especially depending on your position. But I've always been a huge fan of pretty much just doing it all, as long as it falls into the right place at the right time. And I think the way that we utilize Sparta, it really helps us paint a picture of what some of the guys need individually. So that helps us with our programming immensely. So we're not really wasting time or just throwing a bunch of darts at the dartboard and hoping something hits the right spot. So that helps us a lot. But even at the end of the day, we're still doing both single leg and double leg.
Okay. So, no, I like that answer, and I think it's the best answer, right? Because to leave one out would be to leave performance on the table, essentially.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
So
yeah, definitely couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I really like that. Okay, and then switching gears back into the more energy system development side, right? Obviously, in season you don't need to do a ton of conditioning, but for those guys that say do need to do a little bit extra that aren't hitting their markers, what does that kind of look like in the off season versus the in season?
So in season, it can be a pretty loaded question because we've had a couple of different coaches over the years.
Okay.
We've had coaching styles.
Yeah.
One where we had one coach in the past who didn't like to do a lot of technical work. His practices sometimes were very, very short.
Mm-hmm.
He was always like, yeah, we want it to be really short and really sharp. And they usually were, in the sense of like, he kept the intensity high, but the volume was so low. So we would have to do additional volume.
Yeah.
And we would just use the bike to supplement that and do some extra cardiac output work.
Mm.
But now our current coach, his trainings are a little bit longer, and he likes to do like longer, drawn out technicals where maybe the technical might go continuously for 10 to 15 minutes, and we monitor our heart rate, and it's staying right around like 120 to 140. So it's really good cardiac output work. And then we'll jump into like more high intensity stuff. So that kind of, in the long run, kind of just balances it out from the training standpoint. So we don't really have to do too much extra besides maybe some high intensity, longer running. So they're getting volume or getting more high intensity distance. And then the rest is going to be like either the strength training or just recovery based stuff as well. So I think with that being said, then as we go into the off season, because with our new coach, they are getting a little bit more volume, at least for the first couple of weeks. I mean, we're not asking them to really do any kind of weight-bearing type of ESD. Most of it's going to be machine-based or maybe in the pool for at least the first 2 or 3 weeks. Just let the tissue relax, recover, and then we'll start getting back into running volume. We'll start with more extensive stuff and then start to get more intensive as they build up closer to the preseason.
Okay. And so kind of switching gears again back into, let's say, the resistance training side, how does that look kind of, you mentioned the preseason, off-season a little bit, right? How does that kind of look in season? Are you able to kind of get the guys at all, or is that kind of just touch and go based off the schedule, or what does that look like?
Like what is our resistance training schedule like on a weekly basis?
Yeah. Within in-season. You touched on the off-season a little bit, right? But how does that look kind of in-season with games and all that travel and everything?
Yeah, so I mean, I can just run you down on like a typical microcycle for like a 7-day period. So like say we have a match on a Saturday, and then we're going to have a match the next Saturday. Usually that next day we're either going to train the reserves, or it's going to be off. And then the day after that, like the game day +2 or the -5, is going to be either a regen session or a training for the guys that didn't play. And then the day after that, third day, the game day +3, which has given the guys enough time to kind of recover. And then we'll look to start building for the next week. It can be the day that we're going to have like our total body strength workout, where we're going to do the more intensive stuff, whether it's like some front squats or some single leg deadlifts or some split squats or some trap bar or whatever it is. And then the next day after that is usually going to be the day that we're going to do a little bit of extra running if needed. And then 2 days before the game, we usually do more of like a power activation type workout, where if there is a lower body exercise, it's going to be more on the just concentric focus. It might just be some Kaiser power pulls and some box jumps, and then a little bit of upper body, and maybe some ancillary work that would be like kind of FMS based or just pre-ab, if you will. And then day -1, and then the match.
Okay. No, that's really simple when you put it just like that. Yeah.
To be fair, that was some stuff that I've learned from Australian rules football. Again, I think it was on the rugbystrengthcoach.com. Like there's a couple of really good templates on there about like how to build just like a super easy microcycle, and just following that out over like maybe a six-week macrocycle, mesocycle, and we've had a lot of success with it over the last 3 years. Yeah, it's just been great.
Excellent. No, I really like that approach. And like I said, it's simple, it's laid out. I mean, a lot of good stuff comes from the Aussie Rules football, like you said. So that's great resource.
Well, amazing resources for sure.
So moving forward a little bit, right? So how can we? Obviously, the athletes are on the turf a lot. They're in cleats a lot. How can we kind of guard athletes from maybe the negative effects that like turf might have on them physically? Or is there a need to do that?
Oh yeah, I agree that there is for sure. The turf is extremely demanding. I think most of the injuries bigger injuries from like meniscus and things like that have been on turf. Fortunately for us, we train on really good grass, but then our home games are on turf, and it's pretty good turf, but nonetheless it's turf. And then our second team, they're constantly training on turf all the time. So you see a lot of lower body injuries injuries and like low back discomfort from those guys, especially in the preseason when it takes their body a little time to acclimate to the surface. But in regards to trying to, maybe mitigate some of those injuries, I think, one, being strong is definitely huge because it's very impactful on your joints. And then the coaches just need to be very mindful of the volume of training that they're doing. Because, even just when I'm out there standing on the turf, like my back, my feet, and my hips and things just start to hurt. I'm just standing or doing a light little bit of running or moving. And it's the real deal. Like, the turf is not great.
Yeah.
And that's, people complain about it all the time because it doesn't feel good on your body, especially for the older athletes.
Yeah.
It's hard for them.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. And even with their cleats being or their feet being in cleats so often, do you ever, or does the athletic training side, have you seen anything as far as like foot care, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's definitely huge for us, for sure, especially taking care of the hallux of the great toe and making sure that the short foot connection, glute connection is proper. So we take a lot of the principles from Dr. Emlis Bleichel and taking care of the feet and making sure that they're strong and connected. And then our therapists and our athletic trainers and physical therapists do a great job of making sure that they're massaging the guy's feet and mobilizing their joints and making sure that their feet are in a good spot, especially the soccer players. That's how they get their money, is with their feet. So they got to make sure they take really good care of them, and that includes getting things like pedicures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The foot is just extremely healthy. But then we're doing a lot of foot strengthening exercises as well to make sure that the ankles staying strong and everything. Because the feet, they take a beating, especially on the turf.
Yeah, no doubt. And like you said, just being out on the field and jogging a little bit, set up some cones, it's like you start to feel the effects of it. So I can only imagine what the guys are feeling.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And then in the middle of the summer when it's extra hot out there and your feet are starting to melt, it's even worse. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. No, I can. It's a tough sport, and I definitely agree with all that, right? And so even moving forward with some more injury stuff, right? Are there any kind of preventative protocols that you guys like to implement specifically for any like areas of body? I know you talked about for the glute and the hamstring, right? You do that protocol. Are there anything else that you guys like to do for like necessarily like hip flexors, groin, anything like that?
So we're pretty big into Pilates, especially for the groin and the hip flexor and just, great pillar preparation as well. But so we have a reformer and we have kind of a couple different routines that we have the guys doing on a daily basis, especially guys that have been more prone to hip flexor or groin injuries. So we have them get on there on a daily basis, or a couple of different other exercises as well. So that's been massive for the groin complex. And as far as just other injuries, I think just having a well-rounded, strength and conditioning, well-rounded warm-up, and like putting all of your energy into that 10 to 20 minutes that the coach gives you at the beginning of training is huge. And then even just this year, we've started to implement a little bit more mandatory prehab or pillar prep training before 1 or 2 trainings a week, and that's been very helpful as well. Because in the past, we used to not have as much time in the morning before we got to training. It was only about an hour. The guys would come in 9, we'd be on the field training by 10, and it just wasn't enough to get them, fed with breakfast and then see the trainers and the therapists, and then there was no room really left for us except for that 10 to 20 minutes before we get on the field for training. I think, that warm-up, as long as you take it seriously every time and, try to you just coach the hell out of it, that can put the guys in a really, really good spot to stay healthy.
Okay, and that's the perfect segue. So what kind of does that warm-up look like? And do you have different ones for, say, practice and game, or is it all the same? And what kind of things are you kind of layering in there?
Yeah, definitely. So our game is the same every time. We're very habitual. Like, we want the guys to have a routine before a match. So like we've pretty much been doing the same warm up since I've been here in 2015. Hasn't changed. We just keep it simple and more or less had a lot of success with it. So we've been good there. But yeah, our warm ups on all the different training days, it's constantly changing. We're wanting the guys, wanting it to be fresh, it helps keep the guys engaged, but at the end of the day, we're still going to have that same skeleton that we're going to go through. We're just going to do some general movement to get thermoregulation, just some kind of like global motor patterns, and then we'll get into more of our dynamic warm-up stuff, which is going to be every single day. We're always going to do like some type of reverse lunge, lateral lunge, single leg RDL, maybe some toe touch. Just those simple moves, world's greatest stretch that we're going to do every day. Those are like our flossing exercises, if you will. Like every single day, we've got to do it to help make sure that the body's in optimal mode to perform. And then from there, we'll get into some type of activation, whether it's glute or whether it's just neuromuscular activation. And then we'll get into usually some type of movement skill or some type of reactive movement drill. And then they're off with the coaches. Again, it's pretty much always the same as far as the skeleton goes, but then we're constantly changing out the drills. Because if we know basically one day a week we're going to sprint, so we're going to do an absolute speed session. We're going to do a lot of technical stuff, and then we're going to finish off with some free sprints. Or if it's a day when we know we're going to play like 8v8, so we're going to have actually a little bit of time to do some more like change of direction stuff that maybe resisted or assisted, then we're going to get into that for a little bit, or maybe throw in some plyometrics wherever we see fit, as long as it falls into the training scheme for the day.
Yeah. Okay. No, I really, really like that. Okay. And then moving forward just a little bit into more things that have personally affected you and kind of your coming up, right? So what are some resources that have had a big impact on you, whether that's a book, a podcast, or even like a conversation with another coach or something?
Definitely all of my mentors that I've had over the years. So starting at Oregon State when I was working there under Brian Miller, he was huge. And then Coach Chris Anderson that was also there, he was the strength and conditioning coach for the baseball team at Oregon State. Had tremendous success. He's been huge. I mean, most of the programming that I've learned came from that guy, and then the rest from Exos. So those two guys over at Oregon State, and then a lot of the guys over at Exos when I was down there at the facility in Arizona. So Eric Dannenberg, he was huge. Jair Lee, Nicole Rodriguez, Nick Winkleman who was there when I was there, and then Brett Bartholomew. There were some big names that were down there that I had the pleasure to work with, and then even having the Altus guys just kind of off doing their own thing. I mean, getting to even just view and watch some of their stuff as just, like kind of a fly on the wall. Just watching Dan Path and Stuart McMillan coach is pretty unreal. Just learning from those guys. I mean, they're some of the best in the business. Yeah. Some of the brightest minds. And then as far as podcasts, I mean, your podcast has been great. You've had some big hitters on there and some really, really good stuff coming from you. And then Joel Smith with, Just Fly Performance, Basic Performance, Mike Robertson. So, I mean, trying to listen to those podcasts as much as I can on my commute into and out of work has been huge. So I'm actually doing something with my time when you're stuck in the car. Get a little bit better.
Yeah, and Portland traffic's no joke, so...
Yeah, it's definitely not fun. At least a half an hour to and from every day.
Well, I appreciate that, Coach, and I appreciate that you listen to it and support it, and I'm glad that we can kind of put something out there. If you have any, what are some quotes that you live by?
Let's see, that's a good question. Honestly, one that I've always kind of lived by, just because I'm a hockey player, is you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So taking that from the great one and understanding, like, if you don't take that shot, to either go to the internship or go and meet people when you go to the NSCA clinics or something like that, you're never going to score. And so for me, especially, like, I mean, when I was coming from Oregon State and was like, I'm going to go to Exos and do this internship, it was really big for me financially because I didn't have a ton of money to kind of just move down there and, pretty much full-time intern and not get paid or anything like that. So that's a huge roll of the dice. But, I mean, if you don't roll the dice, you're never going to win. So that's huge.
Yeah.
Especially you got to get out there. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Is there a thought or experience from your past that you've kind of held on to that's made a big difference in your life now?
Oh, man, that's a good one. I guess from an experience standpoint, I mean, my father, he passed away at a young age, so I was that left my mother to raise just myself and my sister by herself. And I mean, just that experience alone, watching her work super, super hard to put food on the table for 2 kids, and just her work ethic. And I mean, that was probably huge for me. And that's always something that's been in my mind, is like, if my mom could do what she did, I can almost do anything. So that's huge for me.
I like that. Okay. What is the best advice you've ever been given?
Best advice I've ever been given. So when I was interning at Oregon State, Brian Miller told me, he's like, the more you know, the more you realize you know nothing. When I was young, when I was like starting out as an intern there, I was definitely like this guy who kind of thought he knew it all. I was pretty well read, and, listened to like a lot of podcasts, and kind of read everything. And I was always kind of smart ass, and like kind of a know-it-all. And for sure, that was good advice for me, because it made me a little bit more humble. I kind of rubbed people the wrong way, because I came off as like this guy that knew it all. And so I think getting that advice was huge for me, especially when I left from there to go to Exos, because then I was a little bit more humble and ready for kind of the bigger next level, if you will. And I think that's part of what made me successful coming through as an intern, and then kind of got lucky to land the job with the Timbers that I have now.
Yeah, no, I like that. Okay. So in contrast to that, what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Probably I've had some bad like strength coaches or personal trainers say, all you got to do is just get stronger, in the context of just lifting more weight. And that I hear that a lot from strength coaches, or at least I used to. And I felt like at the time I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Just all you got to do is get strong, you get better, and that's like couldn't be further from the truth. Strength is it's more than just lifting weight. It's about moving. It's about mental. It's about taking care of your body. It's about making the right decisions nutritionally, right decisions from a sleep habit standpoint. So there's so much more to sports performance than just lifting more weight.
Yeah.
But for me, that was definitely the worst advice I've ever gotten.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. If you want to simplify our kind of positions to that, you might as well just go get the strongest power lifter. But it's not going to be the same effect, right? Like you said, there's so many factors.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the name strength and conditioning coach needs to change, because obviously we wear a lot more hats than just those two. And then people always put strength before conditioning. It almost should probably be the opposite.
Yeah, big S, little C, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I forget who I heard that from, but it couldn't be more true. Like you said, everyone focuses on the weight room, but then you put them on a field and they're like, what do I do?
Yeah, 100%. I think the paradigm has shifted a bit since over the last few years for the better, for sure, 100%. Better.
I agree.
So hopefully continue to change that, and see more performance coaches or physical preparation coaches, because that's more or less what we really do. We're wearing a lot of hats, and it's a lot more than just strength and conditioning. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay. So last question here. What are some projects that you're kind of currently working on, and how can people kind of reach out to you and follow your journey? There's no big personal projects. I'm in the middle of finishing up my master's degree. So I've been super busy with that, plus work, because we're in season. But yeah, nothing big as far as, not doing anything that's probably going to be changing the strength and conditioning in the next couple of years. But as far as just reaching out to me, the only media platform that I'm really on is Instagram. I don't even have a Twitter, which I probably should get that back, because there's, Twitter's great as far as for learning and getting information from other coaches and stuff like that. It's big. But yeah, I'm rarely on Facebook. Don't have a Snapchat or anything like that. So yeah, it's pretty much just Instagram. Excellent. And email. And the occasional LinkedIn. Email and LinkedIn? Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. This has been great. I gained a lot from it, and I know there's a lot of things I got to re-listen to and kind of dive into. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we connect again soon in the future.
Hey, perfect. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.